Today, they put me in the car like furniture. No tears, no hug, no real goodbye. Just a weak smile from my son and a careful now as he helped me into the back seat. And then, that whisper. My granddaughter leaned in so close I could smell the bubblegum on her breath. "Grandma, my parents are taking you to a new home today," she said like it was a surprise party, like I should be excited. I nodded and smiled. I didn't want to scare her. But inside, I shattered. The seatbelt clicked and something inside me just broke wide open. I felt it like a string in my chest pulling tight and then snapping clean through. My throat burned and I bit my tongue hard just to stop the sob. But the tears came anyway. Quiet, hot, and bitter. I kept my face turned to the window so they wouldn't see. Let me know where you're listening from. I always love seeing how far these stories travel. And if this story speaks to you, share your thoughts below. Don't skip, because what happens at the end will surprise you more than the betrayal itself. The car ride was short, 20 minutes maybe, but it felt like hours. I couldn't believe this was happening. I couldn't understand when it had turned. When had I become a burden? I looked at my reflection in the glass. Gray hair tucked under my knit cap. Hands folded neatly in my lap. I looked small. How did I get small? I wasn't always this. I was strong once. I was fierce once. My hands used to fix things, change diapers, lift groceries, soothe fevers, build futures. And now they just rested. Quiet. Useless. I saw my son glancing at me in the mirror. He caught my eyes for a second. Looked away. We pulled up to a place I didn't recognize. A gray building with a blue door. The kind of place that calls itself residential living, but smells like mop water and boiled carrots. I said nothing. He opened the door. "Here we are," he said softly, like he was being kind. I stepped out on legs that didn't want to move. My granddaughter waved from the window seat. I waved back and smiled like it didn't kill me. Like I wasn't bleeding inside. They showed me a room. Your new space, they said. A bed, a chair, a plastic vase with fake flowers. A window that looked out over a parking lot. I sat down slowly. My son handed me a bag. "Just for a little while," he said, "until the house is ready." What house? What readiness? But I nodded. I always nod. They left in under 10 minutes. No lingering, no questions. Just the promise that they'd check in. The door closed behind them and the silence fell like snow. Thick, cold, heavy. I sat there for a long time. I didn't cry anymore. I just stared. That night, I lay in the too-stiff bed and tried to count backward from 100. Like I used to teach my son when he had nightmares. "Breathe, baby," I'd whisper. "Count with Mama." And now, I counted alone. 98, 97, 96. And then I remembered something. A detail, a word. That whisper from my granddaughter. "They're taking you. Not we're. Not we want to help. They." My heart ached, not just from what was done, but because the smallest one had seen it for what it was. Maybe she didn't understand the meaning, but she'd felt the truth. Children know. I curled to my side, clutching the pillow like it could rewind time. My house, my garden, my chair by the fireplace. My memories? Gone, just like that. No discussion, no dignity. Just a decision made in whispers and executed in silence. And still, I said nothing. Not to the nurse, not to the neighbor across the hall who offered me pudding, not to the director who asked if I was settling in. I just smiled and nodded and let them believe what they wanted, because I wasn't ready yet. But I would be. I would be. I raised that boy with my whole soul. Every inch of who I was became who he needed me to be. His father died when he was 6, a heart attack in the middle of a snowstorm. I remember it like a photograph burned into my mind. The red and blue lights flashing on the front lawn, the neighbor holding my hand, the stillness in the house afterward. And my son, my sweet boy sitting on the couch in his dinosaur pajamas whispering, "Is Daddy coming back?" I knelt down that night and promised him he'd never have to worry about anything again, that I'd take care of it all. And I did. I really did. I cleaned hotel rooms during the day and stocked shelves at a grocery store at night. Some weeks I barely slept, but I packed his lunches, helped with homework, and stood at every school play with my hands shaking from exhaustion. He was all I had. My world shrank around him like a glove molded to his shape. Every decision I made, every sacrifice, I thought it was love. I still think it was. And when he got into college, I clapped until my palms burned. I sold my mother's ring, a piece of gold I'd been saving for decades, just to help him with books. He told me he didn't want me to worry, that he'd take care of me when I was old. He said it twice. I remembered that. I remembered every word. I remember the first time he brought her home. Madison, pretty, polished, a real estate agent with eyes that never quite landed on mine. She was polite, terribly polite, too polite. She shook my hand like I was a client and told me she admired the way I'd managed as a single mother. I didn't like her, but I smiled. I baked a pie. I offered the guest room. And when they got engaged, I told myself maybe she'd warm up. Maybe she just needed time. After the wedding, they moved in with me temporarily. They wanted to save up for their own place. I made space, gave them the master bedroom. I moved into the smaller guest room and made it cozy. They insisted it was just for 6 months. It turned into 6 years. Still, I didn't complain. I liked having them around. When my granddaughter was born, I cried so hard I couldn't speak. Holding her was like being handed a second chance, a fresh seed in tired soil. I sang to her, changed her diapers, walked the floors when she had colic. Sometimes when her mother went out for errands, she'd reach for me like I was the only person in the room. Mama G, she called me, a name she made up herself. That name healed things in me I hadn't even realized were broken. But slowly things began to shift. Madison started correcting the way I did things. "We don't use powder anymore, Mama G, it's outdated. She shouldn't eat that, it's too much sugar." And my son, he started nodding along. Less eye contact, shorter visits to my room. Then one day, I found out they'd opened a separate bank account for the house bills. Madison said it was to streamline things. I asked for a copy of the statement. She said, "Don't worry, we've got it covered." And that was the first time I felt like a guest in my own home. I tried to ignore it. I kept making Sunday breakfast. I still bought birthday gifts, stocked the fridge with his favorite juice, took out the trash when it got too full. But I noticed. The fridge magnets disappeared one by one. My name wasn't on the mail anymore. My photo in the hallway was replaced with one of them at Niagara Falls. One night, I heard them arguing in the kitchen. I wasn't meant to hear it, but I did. "She's not going to be around forever," Madison said. "That's not the point," my son answered. "It's still her house. For now, for now." Those words hit me like glass in the dark. For now. I stared at the ceiling that night and couldn't sleep. For now. I raised him. I gave everything, and I was just a for now. But still, I said nothing. I didn't argue. I didn't confront. I just tucked those words into the back of my heart like a sharp little splinter. And then came the whispers, the soft, secret conversations, the sudden enthusiasm about downsizing, Madison's voice getting warmer whenever she mentioned independent living communities. The flyers that appeared on the counter. Then the moment came. That day in the car. That little whisper from my granddaughter. And here I was, in a room that wasn't mine, wearing a sweater I hadn't packed, staring out a window at a life I never agreed to. But I remembered something, that I still had my mind, that I still had my name on certain papers, that I still had time. They may have taken me out of the house, but they hadn't taken everything. Not yet. Things changed when she came into our lives. Madison didn't slam the doors. She didn't throw tantrums. She did it with smiles and suggestion, with soft comments in front of my son that sounded like concern but landed like bricks. She seems a bit forgetful, don't you think? Maybe she'd be happier somewhere with people her own age. It's just hard to keep things balanced with her always around. Always around. That phrase followed me like a shadow, as if my presence was a stain they couldn't wash out. At first I brushed it off. I told myself they were stressed. Young parents, new careers. I tried to help more cooked meals, cleaned the kitchen, folded their laundry. But Madison started redoing things I'd already done. She'd remake the beds, reshuffle the pantry, undo every trace of my hands in the home. I started staying in my room more. I didn't want to be in the way. I noticed the small exclusions, the whispered plans for weekend getaways that didn't include me. My granddaughter's birthday party that suddenly got relocated to Madison's sister's house. "It'll just be easier over there," she said, not meeting my eyes. My son avoided the conversation altogether. When I asked what time I should be ready, he mumbled something about it being tight this year. I stayed home. I baked the cake anyway, just in case. And then the boxes started showing up. At first, I thought they were just ordering things online. But no, they were storage bins. Labeled in Madison's handwriting. Holiday decorations, attic. Guest room clutter, donate. Books, outdated. Guest room clutter. That was my room. My books. My winter coat. I opened a box and found my wedding album inside. No note, no warning. Just packed away like old receipts. One morning, I came into the kitchen and found Madison holding my medicine bottles. She didn't see me at first. She was reading the labels, turning them in her hands like she was doing inventory. When she noticed me, she smiled, but her hand hovered just a second too long. "Just checking dates," she said brightly. "Don't want you taking anything expired." I nodded, but something tightened inside me. That night, I counted every pill. I began keeping them in a pouch under my pillow. My son started working later hours, or so he said. He came home, tired, irritable, quiet. When I asked how things were going, he'd answer with a shrug. No more hugs. No more sitting on the couch and talking about the news. No more of the warmth I remembered. I began to feel invisible. Except to my granddaughter. She still knocked on my door every night. Sometimes she'd crawl into bed with me, her small hand finding mine. "I like your room better," she'd whisper. "It smells like cinnamon." She was the only thing keeping me whole. The only person who still saw me as someone. Then came the day I found my things missing. Not packed, gone. My mother's brooch, the one I kept in a velvet box. The gold locket with my husband's picture. 2 of my scarves. I asked Madison if she'd seen them. She blinked. "I think we put them in storage. Just trying to declutter." "Storage?" I asked where the storage was. She said, "Oh, I think Brian handled it." Brian, my son, didn't even know where half the boxes had gone. A week later, I came home from a walk to find a real estate agent standing in the front hall. Smiling, clipboard in hand. "Just a preliminary look," Madison explained. "No pressure, just exploring options." Options. I didn't say a word, just walked past them to my room, closed the door, and locked it for the first time in 15 years. I sat on the edge of my bed, hands folded, breathing slowly. My heart pounded, but my mind was clear. They were planning to sell the house. My house. The next morning, I tested a theory. I left my phone unlocked in the kitchen. I waited behind the corner. Madison picked it up, scrolled, paused, then put it down. I checked the recent apps. She'd opened my banking app. I didn't confront her. I didn't tell my son. I just started writing things down. Dates, times, comments, changes, passwords updated, documents copied. A folder marked private in my desk drawer, not the one in my room, the one they'd forgotten in the basement. I still cooked breakfast, still smiled when they walked through the door, still watched cartoons with my granddaughter. But I stopped speaking as much. I watched, I listened, and I prepared. They thought they were easing me out gently. They thought I was too old to notice, too tired to fight, too kind to resist. But I had something they didn't: history, patience, and the truth. I said nothing, but I stopped smiling. That was the first shift. I kept moving through the house like a ghost in soft slippers, but the warmth left my voice. I still made tea for my granddaughter, still folded towels when no one was watching, but I no longer asked how Madison's work was going. I didn't comment on the weather. I didn't offer small talk over dinner. Silence, I realized, was sharper than any word I could offer. And in that silence, I started watching. Really watching. They were moving faster now. Madison began making calls when she thought I was asleep, her voice just low enough to stay hidden behind closed doors. But I'd been a mother too long not to hear the rhythm of plans being made. End of August, I heard one night. She won't fight it. She's easy. She's easy. I let the words settle. I felt them press into my ribs like a cold coin. I stopped asking permission to leave the house. I walked when I pleased. I took longer trips to the pharmacy. I asked questions at the local library about wills, property laws, assisted living contracts. I made copies of things, quietly, my birth certificate, the deed to the house. The title still had my name. They hadn't touched that. They thought it was old paperwork. They forgot I handled all of it back when Brian was still learning to tie his shoes. One night, I walked into the den and saw my son on the phone looking pale. He ended the call quickly when he saw me. "Everything okay?" I asked. He nodded. Too fast. Too practiced. "Just work stuff," he mumbled. But I saw the sweat on his brow. The way his knee bounced. Something wasn't right. The next day, I made a phone call of my own, to an old friend, Irene. We hadn't spoken in years, but she was still working part-time at the municipal clerk's office. Still sharp as ever. I asked her to help me verify the title on my home. She hesitated at first, but when I explained things, her tone changed. "Gail, your name's the only one on it." "Still is." I exhaled slowly. "And taxes paid up," she said. "By you. Through your account." I hung up the phone and smiled for the first time in weeks. That night, I sat at the kitchen table alone and made a list. Not a grocery list. A list of things I still owned, still controlled, still had the right to decide. And at the top of that list I wrote, "My house." I called a lawyer the next morning. A quiet man named Milton, recommended by Irene. He didn't ask questions. Just listened. Took notes. Nodded often. I handed him the folder I'd built over the last 3 weeks. All the receipts, emails I'd printed from the family computer. Even a recording or two where Madison spoke a little too plainly. He whistled softly when he reached the 4th page. "You've done your homework." I nodded. "They're moving to sell." Behind my back. Or at least pressure me to sign off. "Do not sign anything," he said immediately. "Not a scrap of paper. Not a conversation you don't understand. You have more power than they think." I sat a little taller in the chair. That weekend, I said nothing to Brian or Madison. I simply observed. Madison was chipper, overly so. She offered to make dinner, complimented my cardigan, even asked if I wanted to go to the garden store with her. I smiled politely. Declined. Sunday night, I heard them talking again. This time in the garage. She's acting strange. She knows something. She can't. You said it was done. No, she hasn't signed the release yet. Then push her. We need the money before school starts. Need the money. There it was. Not concern, not help. Just money. The next morning, I walked into my granddaughter's room while she was drawing. Can I see? I asked. She nodded and held up a picture of a house. Our house, but the windows were different. What's this? I asked. She pointed. Mommy says someone's going to make it nicer. With stone. Stone? She nodded. And a pool. I blinked slowly. Madison had been describing renovations to my granddaughter. Not just talking about selling. Dreaming about redesigning it. Already placing themselves into a future that wasn't theirs. I kissed my granddaughter's forehead and walked back to my room. I opened the drawer. Took out the papers Milton gave me and tucked them into my purse. That afternoon, I got a ride to the notary's office. I filed an addendum to my will. Added my granddaughter's name as a future trustee. Milton reviewed everything. We filed protections on the house. No transfer could happen without my signed approval, now double verified by my legal rep. I returned home and made dinner like normal. Said nothing. Just waited. They still thought I was easy. They had no idea what I'd already done. They didn't know whose name was still on the deed. They didn't know what I'd done in that quiet little office with Milton. They didn't know that with a few signatures and 2 notarized pages, I'd built a wall they couldn't see but couldn't cross. I watched them walk through the house like they already owned it, passing by my folded blankets and family pictures like they were just decorations in their new investment. They had no idea that their grip on this place was as fake as the smiles Madison kept tossing my way. The week after I finalized everything with Milton, I made myself smaller on purpose. No resistance, no sass. I let them believe what they wanted to believe. Madison started leaving housing brochures on the kitchen table again, this time with circled prices and notes in the margins. Only 15 minutes from good medical care. Community center with weekly bingo. All meals included. I read every word. Then I slid them neatly into a drawer beside the garbage. One evening, they sat me down like I was a toddler. My son smiled that tight, uncomfortable smile I used to see on him when he lied about skipping school. Mom, we've been thinking. It might be better for everyone if you tried one of these places for a while. I looked between them, and the house Madison chimed in like it was casual. Well, we could manage it for you. Keep it in shape. Handle the finances. You wouldn't have to worry about anything. I let silence do the talking. She went on. It's just, you've been forgetful lately. And this place is a lot to handle. Whose name is on the title again? I asked. Madison froze. My son coughed. Well, it's still yours, of course. But that's just paperwork. It's not about control. It's about peace of mind. I stood slowly. I'll think about it. Then I left the table, calm and quiet. That night, I added another name to my private contact list, my niece Beth, a paralegal in Toronto. She was sharp, kind, and she adored me growing up. We hadn't spoken in a couple years, but she answered on the second ring. Auntie Gail, she said like she couldn't believe it. I told her everything. Not the sob story version. The truth. Every quiet detail. By the end, her voice had gone ice cold. Do you want me to come? She asked. Not yet, I said. But soon. Madison's behavior changed almost immediately, like she sensed something in the air. She stopped leaving brochures on the counter. Stopped making casual comments about next steps, but she started locking the office door. Started whispering more at night. My son was quieter. He kept fiddling with his phone, glancing at me like he was waiting for me to explode. But I never did. That was the fun of it. I smiled. I said thank you when they passed the salt. I folded laundry while they ran errands. They thought they were winning. Until the basement flooded. I came downstairs one morning to find water covering half the laundry room. Pipes had burst. There was shouting phone calls, buckets panic. Madison was on the phone with the insurance company in minutes. I watched her from the hallway. Yes, the property's in our family. Yes, we're taking care of it. Yes, we have plans for renovation. I stepped into the room. Who are you speaking with? She turned, startled. Just the insurance rep. They'll cover part of the repairs. Under whose name is the policy? She blinked. Mine, I said softly. It's under mine, like the title, like the mortgage, like the utilities. If they send a check, it'll be addressed to me. Her mouth tightened. We were just trying to help. I smiled. Of course. That evening, I received a voicemail from a local agent. Mrs. Gale, we received your inquiry about the policy adjustment and home status. Just following up before we close the change request. I had requested nothing. They'd tried to alter my policy behind my back. That night, I sat in my room with the lights off and listened to the quiet hum of the house. My house. My walls. My floorboards. I traced my fingers along the edge of the desk, where my husband once carved our initials when we first moved in. I whispered, "You built this with me, Charles? They don't get to take it." And I meant it. The next morning, I called Beth again. "I'm ready," I said. She arrived 2 days later. Sharp blazer-high ponytail eyes like a hawk. Madison's face turned white when she opened the door. "This is my niece," I said. "She's here to help with some paperwork." Beth smiled, teeth and all. "I just need to speak with the homeowners." Madison opened her mouth. Beth raised an eyebrow. The legal homeowners. I stepped forward. That would be me. For the first time, they were silent. Then the basement flooded. Not the kind that soaks old rugs and makes you curse the washing machine. No, this was deliberate. Or at the very least, convenient. I was the one who found it. Again. I'd gone downstairs to get an old box of photo albums when I heard the squish beneath my slippers. I stood there in cold water, ankle-deep, staring at the dark tide spreading across the basement floor. The smell hit next mildew and something sharper, something sour. I backed up slowly, holding the rail, and called up the stairs. Brian. No answer. Madison silence. I called the emergency plumber myself, gave my name, gave my address, spelled it slowly. By the time Brian got home, the plumber was already down there muttering to himself. Rusted valve, he said. Looks like it's been leaking for a while. Who lives here again? I do, I said. Brian flinched when he heard that. We all live here, he corrected too fast. The plumber looked between us. Right. Well, whoever's on the paperwork's who they'll contact for the bill. Me, I said again, holding his gaze. He nodded, made a note, and left. Madison was furious. You should have told us before you called someone. I didn't realize I needed permission to fix my own home, I said. That shut her up. 2 days later, I caught them in the kitchen with a real estate agent. Again. I thought we weren't showing the house yet, I said, stepping into the room. The agent turned, startled. Oh, I was just taking a few reference photos. Did you get my permission? I assumed they had it. They didn't. The woman clutched her clipboard and left quickly. Brian followed me down the hall. Mom, it's not what it looks like. Then tell me what it is. He hesitated. We're just planning ahead. For what? In case you decide it's time to transition. Simplify things. I'm not going anywhere, I said. But this is my home. His shoulders slumped. We thought we were helping by selling what doesn't belong to you." His eyes dropped to the floor. "It's complicated." "It's really not," I said. "You made it complicated." That night, Madison slammed cabinets harder than usual. My granddaughter came to my room quietly curled up beside me. "Mommy's mad," she whispered. "I know, baby. Did you do something bad, no?" I said softly. "I did something right. For once." They didn't speak to me the next day. Not a word. Not even a good morning. Madison stomped through the house like she owned every tile, but she didn't. Not anymore. And it was starting to dawn on her. Beth came back 3 days later. She brought a briefcase this time. And a printed stack of documents. I sat at the dining table calm while Madison hovered near the door like a moth to flame. Beth cleared her throat. "Per legal standing and under the Ontario Residential Tenancies Act, Gail has full and final control over this property. Any attempt to alter, sell, or transfer ownership without her written consent constitutes fraud." Madison scoffed. "We weren't trying to sell." Beth lifted a page. "Then explain this email to Keller and Price Realtors dated 3 weeks ago, quoting a listing price of $729,000 and signed Best Madison and Brian." Brian's face turned ashen. How did you get that?" "She never deleted her sent folder," I said. Madison's voice dropped. "You went through my email, I went through the family computer. In the kitchen, where you left it open." Beth slid another paper forward. "Here's what's happening. We're filing a cease and desist against any unauthorized agents, a legal hold on the title for unauthorized alterations, and a notification to your mortgage bank that any restructuring under Brian or Madison's name is invalid." Madison looked like she'd swallowed glass. Brian sat down slowly. "Mom?" Why, I asked, standing up. "You were going to steal my home, behind my back. You were going to shove me into some building and tear this place apart like it was drywall, and memories meant nothing. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that." Silence. Then Madison spoke. "You didn't want to share. That's what this is." I turned to her. "I opened my door. I gave you my room. I raised your child while you worked late and slept in. I cooked. I cleaned. I gave everything. And you decided it was never enough." Her eyes watered, but she didn't cry. "You wanted control. You thought I was soft. But you forgot who built this place. Who laid the bricks. Who held the papers." Brian whispered, "You're right. We got carried away." "I don't want your apology," I said. "Then what do you want?" I paused. "I want you out." The silence after that was heavy. My words hung there like dust in a sunbeam. Beth nodded once. "Legally, she can do that. You'll have 30 days to vacate." Brian stared at me like I was a stranger. "You're really doing this?" "I already did, and I had. I'd filed the eviction notice 2 days earlier. This was just the reveal." Madison stormed out. Brian followed her. My granddaughter watched from the hallway, confused and scared. That night, I sat alone in the quiet and listened to the wind through the cracked window. The same house, the same walls, but it felt different now. It felt like mine again. They had tried to take everything, but they forgot the one thing I never lost. My name. And that name was still on every line that mattered. He came to my little room and cried. My son, my only child, stood at the doorway, with his shoulders hunched and his eyes rimmed red, like a boy who'd just broken his favorite toy. He didn't knock. He just stepped in the same way he used to crawl into bed beside me when he'd had a nightmare or skinned his knee too bad to hide. But this time, I didn't open my arms. I sat in the armchair by the window, holding my tea with both hands, waiting for him to speak. "I didn't want it to happen like this," he said. I didn't answer. I didn't think it would go this far. Still, I said nothing. He shifted from foot to foot like a child in trouble. Madison? She had ideas. She wanted more space, more control. She said it was time for change. Said you'd be happier with people your own age. I looked up slowly. Do I look happy, Brian? He swallowed hard. No, you look tired. I nodded. I am. Not because of my age, because of betrayal. Because I looked at my son and saw a man who let his wife treat me like a guest in my own life. He sat on the edge of the bed, covering his face. I didn't know how to stop it. You didn't want to, I said flat and plain. It was easier to let her decide. I didn't think you'd fight back. I wasn't supposed to, I said. I was supposed to pack my things. Smile politely. Fade into the wallpaper of some concrete building while you listed my house as a fixer-upper with great resale potential. His mouth tightened. I saw the listing draft I added. You forgot to remove my rocking chair from the photo. I didn't mean to hurt you, he whispered, but you did. I sipped my tea. And now you have 30 days. He leaned forward, elbows on knees, head bowed. Where are we supposed to go? That's not my concern anymore, I said. You had 6 years of free living? You made choices? His voice cracked. What about Harper? I paused. My granddaughter. The only piece of light in all of this. Harper is welcome to visit, whenever she wants. But she stays out of the middle. That's your mess to explain. He looked up, eyes glossy. You're really done with me, aren't you? I studied him for a moment. The boy I raised was buried somewhere under that defeated man, but I didn't reach for him. I'm done with how you've treated me. That's not the same as being done with you. He nodded slowly. I understand. He stood to leave, then hesitated. Do you hate me? No, I said. But I don't trust you. And that's worse. He left without another word. That night, I sat in the living room in the old recliner, my husband's recliner, and let the silence settle around me. No one slammed cabinets. No voices in the hall. Just the low hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of a train passing. 2 days later, Madison left. She didn't slam the door or scream or argue. She just packed her bags and drove off with Harper. I watched from the porch as her car disappeared down the road. My son didn't go with her. I don't know if that was his choice or hers. He stayed in the guest room. Didn't say much. He took the eviction seriously. Started packing. Stopped asking for second chances. I didn't offer one. But I watched. Every evening I'd hear the sound of boxes taping shut, of drawers emptying, of old items being quietly carried out the back door. And once, just once, I heard him crying in the basement. I didn't go to him. Some wounds don't heal by touch. The night before the move-out deadline, he came to me one last time. I'll go in the morning, he said. I looked up from my book. All right. He stood there awkwardly, holding a small wooden box. I found this in the attic. It's yours. I took it, opened the lid. My mother's brooch. My wedding ring. A locket I thought had been stolen. He cleared his throat. She put a lot of things away. Said they were too old. I didn't look. I should have. I nodded once. Thank you for returning them. He hesitated. Do you think someday we could talk? Maybe I said. But not now. He understood. For the first time in months, maybe years. He understood. He left the next morning with 3 boxes and a suitcase. No drama, no tears. Just quiet and the sound of the door clicking shut behind him. And when I walked back inside, the house felt lighter. Empty, yes. But mine again. Completely mine. The quiet wasn't lonely. It was clean. I sat by the window, opened the box he'd given me, and ran my fingers over the locket's smooth surface. I didn't smile. Not yet. But something inside me had shifted. The storm had passed, and the air was finally still. I moved back home, alone. Not the kind of alone that makes your throat tighten or your hands shake in the dark. No. This was different. This was silence that belonged to me. Air that felt mine again. The clatter of dishes, the click of the thermostat, the hum of the fridge, all sounds I hadn't noticed in months. Maybe years. Because when people fill your space without respecting it, even your own breathing becomes muted. The house had been stripped in places, furniture rearranged, a few of my favorite mugs missing. The rug in the hallway replaced with something beige and soulless. But the bones were mine. The warmth still lived in the floorboards. I lit a candle, that first night cinnamon, same as always, and sat at the kitchen table where Charles used to read the newspaper. I didn't cry. I didn't feel triumphant. I just existed, fully finally in my own home. I slept in the master bedroom again, my bedroom. The sheets smelled of detergent I didn't choose, so I washed them twice. I put my old quilt back on the bed, the one with the hand-stitched corners fraying just slightly. It felt like tucking the past around me gently without apology. The next morning, I went outside and walked the perimeter of the house. I touched the garden gate, the stone path, the chipped corner of the porch where Harper once scraped her knee. I stood there, letting the sun warm my face, and realized something that made me pause. I didn't feel angry anymore. Not numb either. Just still. Like a lake after a long windstorm. Harper came the following Sunday. She was holding a drawing in one hand and a small stuffed fox in the other. Madison had dropped her off in silence, never stepping past the sidewalk. I watched her drive away from the window before opening the door. Harper ran in full speed, arms outstretched. Grandma, I knelt and hugged her tight. There's my sunshine. She handed me the drawing our house scribbled in crayon with hearts floating above it. I missed you, she whispered. I missed you too. We made cookies that day. Real ones. Butter and sugar and flour, not the frozen packs Madison used to microwave. Harper cracked eggs with both hands, laughing as shells tumbled into the bowl. We made a mess. A beautiful flour-dusted mess. While they baked, she sat at the table, legs swinging. Mommy said you were mad. I looked up. Do you think I'm mad? She shook her head. You're calm. Like the pond behind the school. I smiled. That's a good way to be. She came back the next weekend, and the one after that. Madison didn't protest. She didn't linger. Maybe guilt kept her quiet, or maybe she was just too tired to fight anymore. Either way, I didn't chase explanations. Beth checked in often. She helped finalize the trust paperwork, ensuring the house would one day pass to Harper, and only Harper. We set up protections, locked it down so tight not even the slickest agent could sneak through a loophole. I also adjusted my will quietly, thoroughly. I wanted no fights later. No chances for someone to twist my wishes into leverage. One afternoon, I stood in the garden with Beth as we trimmed the rose bushes. You know, she said you could sell and buy a condo somewhere sunny? I looked around at the cracked bricks, the leaning trellis, the squirrels watching us from the fence. And leave all this. She smiled. Didn't think so. I still had bad days. The kind where the memory of Brian's face, crumpled and ashamed, flickered through my head like a broken reel. Some mornings, I'd walk past his old room and pause at the door, wondering what might have changed if he'd just said no to her sooner. But wondering doesn't undo damage, and sorrow isn't the same as regret. I got to know myself again. Started baking not because I had to, but because I wanted the smell in the walls. Started reading again old books I hadn't touched in years. Even started keeping a journal, something private full of questions and thoughts and things I never said aloud. I also found small joys planting tulips, learning how to use video calls, meeting a neighbor for coffee once a week. I didn't need grand adventures, just peace. Peace I had earned one scar at a time. Brian didn't come around much. But he called, once every 2 weeks. At first it was stiff, short questions, empty pauses. But slowly, he started telling me about his work again, his apartment, that he was seeing someone new, someone kind. I didn't ask about Madison. I didn't have to. Harper stayed with me for part of the summer. We painted her room sky blue, hung paper stars from the ceiling. She made a habit of crawling into my bed in the mornings, whispering dreams into my ear before I'd even opened my eyes. One night, as we watched old cartoons on the couch, she looked up at me and said, "I like it better here." Why, I asked. "Because you listen." That stayed with me. I had been silent for so long, but I'd never stopped listening. And now, someone listened back. The house didn't feel haunted anymore. It felt healed, not by force, not by revenge, but by presence. Steady, unapologetic presence. I was alone, but never lonely, and that difference made all the difference. Letters started arriving. Not bills, not subscriptions. Real letters, postmarked, handwritten, folded tight like secrets. It began with a pale blue envelope from my cousin Jean in Nova Scotia. We hadn't spoken in over 15 years, not since her second wedding where I refused to wear heels. But inside her letter was warmth and worry and something rare recognition. "Beth told me what happened," she wrote. "I just want you to know you did the right thing. No one gets to erase a lifetime of sacrifice. Not while they're still sleeping under your roof." I read that line twice, then tucked the envelope into the drawer beside my bed. The next was from my friend Lenore, who I hadn't seen since the quilting group dissolved. She'd heard whispers through the town grapevine, said she couldn't believe what my son and daughter-in-law had tried. "We always knew you were the strong one," she ended with. But I didn't know just how strong. Each letter brought something different: comfort, validation, even stories of others who'd gone through the same. Women shuffled into care homes against their will. Grandparents whose wills were rewritten by greedy children. Elders who handed over keys in exchange for a promise only to be left outside the door. It shocked me how common it was, and how quiet. So I started answering. One letter at a time, short notes at first, a thank you, a line or two about the garden, then longer ones. I told them what really happened. Not the version with tear-streaked revenge or courtroom drama, but the slow unfolding of truth. The moments I kept to myself. The silence. The subtle shift when I stopped being seen as a mother and started being seen as an inconvenience. One morning, I received a thick packet with no return address. Inside was a typed manuscript. Someone had written their story, an entire memoir of how their sons sold their land without consent. They asked if I'd read it. "You're the only one who might understand," the note read. I read the entire thing that night, sitting in bed with the reading lamp on low. When I finished, I cried. Not for them, not for me, but because we all carried this shame like it was our fault. Like we failed them when really, they failed us. I called Beth the next day. "I want to write," I said. "You mean like a statement?" "No," I said. "A book, or something close to it. I want to put this out there, for other people like me." She paused, then said the one thing I needed most. "Do it." I didn't know where to begin, so I started with the moment in the car. The whisper. "Grandma, my parents are taking you to a new home today." The story spilled out like warm water. The mornings I spent writing became sacred. I'd rise early, pour tea, and sit by the window with the laptop Beth had given me. I typed slowly, deliberately, like sewing stitches into cloth. Each word was a piece of myself reclaimed. The story wasn't perfect. I didn't try to sound like an author. I just told the truth, and the truth, it turns out, has a sound of its own. Harper became my editor. She'd read parts aloud to me, ask questions, sometimes draw little illustrations in the margins. One day, she looked up from a page and said, "You don't sound angry anymore." "I'm not," I told her. "Not really." She smiled. "Good, because I like your voice when it's calm." I printed the first draft and mailed it to 3 of the women who'd written to me, just to see what they'd say. Within a week, they all responded. One said she cried reading the second page. Another asked if she could share it with her book club. The third said, "This feels like justice, even if no one was arrested." I didn't care if it got published. I didn't care if it ended up on a shelf. I just wanted it to live somewhere besides my head. And now it did. My son called again, this time from a different number. "I got a new phone," he said. "Madison canceled the old plan. Are you two—" I trailed off. "Separated," he said. "It's been months." He didn't say more and I didn't ask. He told me he was in therapy, that he was living with a friend from work, that he'd been thinking about the things he did or didn't do. "I've been reading," he said, "about elder financial abuse, about manipulation." I didn't realize how deep we'd sunk. I asked. He sighed. I didn't stop her. That makes me just as guilty. There was a long pause between us. Then he said something I didn't expect. "I read your story." I went still. "How Beth sent me a copy," he said. "She wanted me to understand." I did. I do. I didn't know what to say. "I'm sorry, Mom." His voice cracked. "I'll never ask for forgiveness. I just want you to know I see it now." I breathed in slowly. "Thank you for calling." And that was all. After we hung up, I sat on the porch, wrapped in the old knitted shawl I'd nearly thrown away. The wind was picking up, curling through the trees with a whispery hum. Leaves rustled. Chimes sang from a neighbor's porch. A story was out there now. Mine. Ours. And stories once shared never really end. They ripple. They echo. They reach people in ways that shame never can. I thought about all the other women still sitting silent in their quiet homes, afraid of what people might say if they spoke up, and I made a promise to myself I'd keep speaking, even if my voice shook, even if no one believed me at first. Because sometimes justice isn't loud. It's patient. It's steady. And it begins with telling the truth. I started teaching again. Not in a classroom, not with lesson plans or chalkboards or bells ringing every 45 minutes. No, this time it was different. It was just a community center down the road and a small sign outside that read, "Adult Learning, All Ages Welcome." I walked past it for weeks before I stepped inside. The woman at the desk looked up. "Can I help you?" I hesitated. "I used to teach. A long time ago? History mostly. But I haven't stood in front of a group in 20 years. She smiled. "We don't need perfect, just passionate." I started Tuesday afternoons with 5 students, all older, all nervous. Some wanted to finish their GEDs, others just wanted something to do besides watch the television all day. One man, Arthur, was 73 and told me he just liked hearing the sound of learning again. "I used to listen through the walls when my son was in school," he said. "They didn't let me stay, but I wanted to know what he knew." I nodded. "Well, you're allowed to stay now." Every week, more people came. Word spread. Someone told someone else, and by week 6, we'd doubled the group. I brought in books from my shelves, made photocopies of old articles, even started a little whiteboard in the corner where we wrote "Today's Big Question." It gave me something to wake up for. A rhythm again. I'd get dressed, fix my hair, even put on lipstick some days. It felt like stepping back into myself. Not the mother, not the widow, not the discarded woman shoved into a side room. Just Gail, the woman who loved ideas. Beth came one day and watched from the back. When we walked to the car afterward, she said, "You're glowing. I feel useful," I said. "You've always been useful," she replied. "But now you're finally seen." That stuck with me. And it wasn't just the class. I started cooking again, not out of necessity, but joy. Tried new recipes, burned a few, laughed more. I opened my curtains every morning, even when it rained. I sat on the porch in the evenings with a book and waved to the same dog-walking couple every night until they started bringing me muffins. I even went on a date. It was a gentle thing. Nothing romantic, really. A man named Howard from the center asked if I'd like to walk with him through the town market one Saturday. I said yes. He wore a navy sweater and brought me a jar of homemade apple jam. We didn't touch hands, just strolled and talked about old music and the cost of cheese. When I told Harper later, she grinned. "Are you going to kiss him?" I laughed so hard I nearly cried. "No, sweetheart, but maybe I'll make him a pie." She approved. That's how you know someone likes you, if they want your pie. She still came over most weekends. We had a little routine now: board games, baking her pretending to be my secretary as I wrote. She called herself Editor-in-Chief Harper and insisted I put her name on the acknowledgments page if I ever published my story. One afternoon, while I was making tea, she sat at the kitchen table flipping through my manuscript pages. "Do you think Mommy will ever say sorry I paused at the kettle?" "I don't know. Would you forgive her?" That question took my breath a little. I turned and looked her in the eye. I already did. Not because she earned it, but because I don't want to carry her mistakes with me anymore. She thought about that. "So forgiving is like putting down a heavy backpack." Exactly. She nodded. I don't think she's put hers down yet. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. A week later, a letter came in Madison's handwriting. Clean, careful, 2 pages long. No pleading, no justifications. Just a list of things she admitted to. Her part in the manipulation, her pride, her fear, her ambition. And at the end, a line I wasn't expecting. "I know I cannot undo what I did, and I won't ask you to pretend. But I am sorry, and I hope one day Harper will understand the whole truth, not just the parts I told her." I read it 3 times, then placed it inside the manuscript folder. Not to forget, but to remember. Proof that people are capable of shame, of trying, even if it comes too late to fix what they broke. I didn't write back. I didn't need to. Instead, I focused on the parts of life I still held. The things no one could take: my voice, my choices, my laughter. The soft ache of grief was still there, of course it was. But it lived beside gratitude now. The kind that comes from surviving something most people don't even talk about. The class kept growing. My freezer stayed full of jam from neighbors. Beth visited every month, and Harper. She started writing her own stories. One night, she read one aloud, about a brave grandmother with silver hair and a heart made of fire. She looked up at me with those wide brown eyes and whispered, "She's you." I hugged her so tight she squeaked, because she saw me. Not the broken parts, not the betrayed woman, but the whole. The real me. The one who never left. My granddaughter slipped me a note. It was small, folded 4 times, tucked inside the front pocket of my cardigan as she hugged me goodbye. Madison had come to pick her up that Sunday, waiting outside in the car as usual. We didn't speak, didn't wave. That bridge would likely never be rebuilt. But Harper crossed any bridge she wanted with nothing more than a pencil and a smile. I didn't open the note until she was gone. I sat down on the porch swing, the one Charles built when we first moved in, and unfolded it slowly. The writing was crooked little hearts dotting the I's, but the message was clear. I remember everything. I'll never forget you. I know who you are, and I love you always. There was a drawing of the house, a sun above it, 2 stick figures, me and her, standing out front holding hands. My eyes burned hot as I held the paper to my chest and let the wind touch my face. I had fought so hard not to become invisible. And here was proof that I hadn't disappeared. Not to her. Not where it mattered. That note stayed with me all day. I put it under the magnet on the fridge where I used to pin school reminders and grocery lists. It felt right there, like something to keep checking, to hold on to when the house felt too quiet or the memories came uninvited. That night, I sat at my writing desk and stared at the blinking cursor. For days, I'd been stuck unsure of how to end my story, unsure if I even should. But now I knew. I reached for the note again, read it one more time, and started typing. I wrote about Harper's eyes. The way she saw me, truly saw me in ways my son had forgotten how to do. I wrote about how children carry truths that adults bury under paperwork and pride. How her love had tethered me to the earth during the darkest moments. Then I wrote about the day I made the final edit. I closed the manuscript, titled it, The Quiet Door, A Mother's Story. Beth helped me submit it. We didn't aim high, just a few small publishers. It wasn't about fame. I wanted it in libraries, in waiting rooms, in the hands of someone just like me. 3 months later, it was accepted. A modest print, modest pay, but a very real book, with a cover and a barcode and everything. They asked for an author photo. I sat in the garden, wore a simple blouse, held my granddaughter's note in my lap, while the photographer adjusted the lens. When I smiled, I wasn't pretending. The first time I held the printed copy, my hands shook. Not from age, from memory. Every page inside carried a version of myself I had once thought lost. But here she was, in print, in ink, in permanence. Harper came for the launch party at the community center. She wore a dress with sparkles and read the dedication aloud. Her voice wobbled halfway through and she whispered, "Can I stop now?" I took her hand and finished it for her. To the one who never let me fade, my light, my truth, my Harper. The room stood and clapped, not out of pity, not out of politeness, but because they knew, they felt it, the shift, the reclaiming. Afterward, as people mingled and bought signed copies, Harper leaned in and whispered, "Mom cried in the car." I looked at her. "Madison." She nodded. She read it, said she didn't know it was that bad. I didn't answer. There was nothing more to say. Some things didn't need fixing, just acknowledgement, just a full stop. Brian sent flowers. A note inside said, "I'm proud of you. I wish I had been sooner." That night, I tucked Harper in upstairs. She begged to sleep over even though it was a school night. I said yes, just this once. As I sat beside her bed, she looked up at me. "Will you write another book?" Maybe I said. "Can I be in it?" "You'll be the heart of it." She smiled. "Will it be sad again?" I paused. "Maybe a little, but it will end in light. Just like this one." That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked the house, touched the walls, stood in the doorway of the room they tried to push me into. That tiny room with the plastic flowers and the echo of betrayal. I'd left it far behind, but I hadn't forgotten. That note, those 14 words from a 9-year-old, had cracked something open, made space, healed more than time ever could. And I knew without a doubt that I would never be put away again. Not by family, not by fear, not by shame. I had told my story. And now others would tell theirs. I forgave him. Quietly. Not with a speech or a letter or a dramatic hug in the rain. It happened on a Tuesday morning just after breakfast when the toast burned slightly, and I caught myself smiling anyway. I was standing by the window sipping tea, watching a squirrel wrestle with a too large piece of bread crust on the fence. And in that small, ridiculous moment, I let it go. The weight, the ache, the loop of what he did and didn't do. I didn't even realize I was carrying it that tightly anymore until I felt it loosen, like a knot that had sat too long in the middle of my chest, finally unraveling without fanfare. Forgiveness didn't come from understanding. It came from the simple truth that I didn't want to be bitter anymore. That what he had done, what they had both done, was already written, already dealt with, and I had survived it. Beth was the first to notice the shift. She came by for coffee that afternoon, and as we sat under the lilac tree in the yard, she looked at me differently. "You're softer today," she said. "Not small, just lighter." I nodded. I forgave him this morning. Didn't even mean to. It just happened. She smiled. That's how it usually goes. That evening, I called him. My son. I didn't tell Harper. I didn't even plan it. I just picked up the phone, scrolled to his name, and pressed call. He answered on the second ring. "Mom, I don't need anything," I said gently. "I'm not in trouble. I just wanted you to hear it from me." A long pause. Then softly, "Okay, I forgave you." I could hear his breath catch. You did. I had to," I said. "Not for you. For me. I wanted to stop holding it." His voice cracked. "I don't deserve it. I didn't say you did," I replied. "But I gave it anyway." He was quiet for a long time. "Thank you," he finally said. "That means more than I can say. I know." We didn't speak long. Just a few minutes. Small things. The weather. His new apartment. He said he was trying reading more, cooking, being alone without being lonely. He asked about Harper, and I told him she was thriving. He didn't ask to come back. I wouldn't have said yes if he had. But the call ended gently with no tension in my shoulders. Just a stillness. A knowing. I told Harper the next day. She was drawing in the garden, lying on her belly and the grass tongue poking out slightly in concentration. "I talked to your dad," I said. She looked up. "Was it bad? No," I said. It was calm. I told him I forgave him. She nodded like she already knew. "You're better at that than most grown-ups." "I had to practice," I said. "A lot." She reached out and touched my hand. "I think he's sorry. For real. I think he is too." She went back to drawing, humming softly. I watched her for a long time, marveling at how forgiveness passes down. How, if done right, it becomes a language, a quiet strength. That weekend, I was invited to speak at a local library event. Authors Among Us, they called it. Just a table and a mic, 10 chairs, and a little banner with my name spelled right. Harper sat in the front row beaming. I read an excerpt from my book, the part about the whisper in the car, the way it pierced the quiet like a shot through water. The audience didn't breathe for 30 seconds. When I finished, an older woman in the back raised her hand. "Did you ever get justice?" she asked. I thought for a moment. "Yes," I said, "but not the kind you expect." It didn't come in court papers or bank transfers. It came in knowing I took my life back. In one piece, on my terms. A man beside her asked, "And your family, did they ever apologize?" "Some did," I answered. "Some didn't. Some can't." But I stopped needing it. That's justice too. Afterward, 2 women came up and hugged me without asking. One whispered, "You told my story before I could find the words." That night, as I cleaned up the last of the teacups and folded the program into my drawer, I felt a peace that was no longer borrowed. It was mine. I didn't live in fear anymore. Not of aging, not of being discarded, not of speaking up. And I no longer saw myself as a victim, not even as a survivor. Just a woman. Whole, flawed, still learning. Forgiveness didn't make what they did okay. It just made me free. I sat by the fire with a blanket over my knees and a new journal in my lap. Not for the old story. That one was done. This was for whatever came next. I wrote one sentence on the first page. I made it back to myself, and that was enough. Now I sit by the window and smile. Not because everything turned out perfectly, not because I got revenge or riches or all the apologies I ever deserved, but because I'm still here, still whole, still mine. The morning light filters through the lace curtains, painting little gold patterns on the hardwood floor. I sip my tea slow now. Nothing rushed, nothing demanded. There's no one knocking on my door to move me out of my own story anymore. This is peace. Not the kind you pray for in a storm, but the kind you find after you've walked barefoot through every broken branch, every shard of glass, and made it to the other side without losing yourself. The house is quiet these days, but not empty. It's filled with echoes I've chosen to keep the good ones. Harper's laughter, the soft thud of her running down the hallway, the clink of teacups during our Sunday chats. Sometimes, if I listen close enough, I can still hear Charles humming in the workshop out back, or the way Brian used to yell "Mom" from upstairs when he couldn't find his socks. And I smile, because I don't need to change the past anymore. I've rewritten the ending. My story lives on a shelf now. Actual spine, actual barcode. I've been told it's circulating in 6 local libraries, 2 book clubs, and 1 college course on modern aging and family dynamics. That last part makes me laugh every time. I get letters from strangers, some short, some pages long. One woman wrote, "You gave me permission to say no." Another said, "Your voice helped me find mine." They all ask the same question in different words. How did you survive it? And my answer is always the same. I never let them convince me I was less. Not even when I stayed quiet. Not even when I was scared. I was always me. They just stopped seeing it. I keep Harper's note in a frame now on the hallway table right beside the photo of her in her graduation dress. Yes, graduation. She made it. She's taller now, voice, deeper ideas, sharper. But she still calls every Saturday morning. Still comes over to help me bake pies I no longer need but love to make. She read my story in her high school lit class last spring. Sent me a picture of the entire page highlighted in yellow, with her comment scribbled in the margin. This woman is my grandmother. And she taught me how to be brave. I printed that out too. Taped it inside the back cover of my own copy. Brian visits once in a while. It's still tender. Still has edges. But he sits on the porch with me now. He brings coffee and asks about the garden. Sometimes we talk about nothing. Sometimes about everything. I don't press. I let him come when he wants. And when he leaves, I always say the same thing. Take care of yourself. He always nods. I'm trying, Mom, and that's enough. Madison hasn't reached out since the letter. I don't expect her to. Some people don't know how to return after shame. That's not my burden. I gave her my forgiveness. What she does with it is hers to carry. I'm not angry anymore. Not disappointed even. Just done. My house is my own again. Filled with warm light, old books, quiet mornings. I host book club once a month. Teach at the center on Tuesdays. I started painting again terribly. I go on long walks without needing to tell anyone where I'm going. Freedom is not always loud. Sometimes it's just the sound of your own footsteps on familiar floors. People still whisper about what happened. Small towns are like that, but I let them. Because now when they whisper, they call me something new. Not the woman who got pushed out. Not the poor mother. Now I hear that's Gail. She didn't let them win. Or she's the one who wrote that book. Or she's the reason my mom said no to the retirement home. Legacy is funny that way. I didn't leave money behind. I didn't build a business. But I left a truth that will outlive me. A roadmap, maybe. A hand-drawn guide for anyone who's ever felt small in a house they built with their own hands. And when I'm gone, Harper will have the keys. Not just to this place, but to her own strength. Because she watched. She listened. She learned that love is not obedience, and kindness is not weakness. She tells me now she wants to work in elder advocacy. Says she wants to help people who aren't being heard. I told her, you already are. Tonight I'll sit on the porch with a slice of pie and the wind in my hair. I'll close my eyes and remember who I've been. A daughter, a wife, a mother, a woman betrayed, a woman redeemed. But most of all, a woman who stayed. Stayed in her truth. Stayed in her home. Stayed in her name. No one carried me back to myself. I walked, step by step, and I'm still walking and smiling.